I'm back in the 2-5, experiencing some swings here in early trading already. Let's jump right in here, shall we? In this first hand, the straddle is on, the hijack open limps, and I look down at a suited connector. I go ahead and bump it up to $45, and everyone on my left calls, and the hijack limper folds. So not exactly the results that I expected there pre-flop, but we'll see what happens here. So we are going 5 ways to a flop, 10-6-5 rainbow with 1 spade. It checks over to me, and it could definitely check here since we're so massively multi-way, but we have a gutter ball to the nuts, and we have some backdoor opportunities as well. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put in a small bet here and see what happens, play some different runouts, some different ways. I bet $85, small bet on a relatively dry flop. Only the button calls. So we are going heads up to a turn card, which picks us up the backdoor flush draw. So we can't stop betting now. I look at her stack and she's got maybe between $700 and $800 in her stack. So with the pot almost $400, in hindsight, I really like a jam. Just the 2x pot size bet. It's gonna be tough for her to continue with all of her 1 pair hands or even pair plus draw hands. Obviously we're gonna get snapped off by sets, but even in that case, we still have decent equity. So I really like just jamming here, but I decide on a more standard bet size of $200. Not really in love with that bet size. My opponent does call, and we are off to see a river card on which we make a pair. Not exactly the river card of dreams. We improve our hand, but only marginally, I would assume. And since we block spades, I don't think it's the best spot to go ahead and jam the river here. We don't have as much fold equity as the stacks are a little bit more shallow now here on the river. So I'm just gonna check and give up. My opponent checks back pretty quickly. I announce the 9, I show the 9, and she says, "Oh no, you hit a 9." She shows us pocket 8s, so we do find it out. An unassumed, unlikely out was the offsuit 9. So again, I think I still like a jam there on the turn. I think she probably has to fold her hand unless she wants to get hero-y. Maybe she still finds a call, but we win anyway. So again, jam would have been the best move there. In this next hand, we're playing 7-handed, and this time the button straddle is on. I look down at ace-king offsuit from under the gun. They get $35 to go. Button calls, and the big blind puts in a 3-bet to $125. When I first sat down at this table, he was very much into the idea of everybody straddling, and he's from Europe, and he seems like he's not there to knit it up. Just the vibe, just the feeling that I'm getting here in this spot. So I'm gonna put in the 4-bet with this ace-king. I don't think he necessarily needs to be super strong just based on my read. I may get $375 to go. The button folds, and the big blind thinks for a bit and then calls. So we're off heads up to see a 4-bet pot here. Flop comes king high with 2 spades. I take a look back at my hand and I do not have any spades in my hand. So after he checks it over to me, I think I want to bet here pretty much with my full range, and I decide on a wager of $250. My opponent thinks for a little bit and makes the call. So things are happening, a pretty decent sized pot brewing here. The turn is an offsuit ace. We make top 2 pair and he checks it over to me. I think checking back here is certainly reasonable. We have a lot of his calling range probably blocked. With top 2 pair, there's not a whole lot of combinations left that he can continue on. But again, considering that I don't have any spades and neither the ace nor the king on the board is a spade, that should allow for some combinations of flush draws, which usually don't play a big part in 4-bet pots, but this one, there could be some potential here, and I think giving a free card in this spot would be not exactly ideal. Think about all the spade combos that he could have here: king queen suited, king jack suited, king 10 suited, even a hand like queen jack suited, queen 10 suited, all the ace high flush draws that are going to be able to continue versus a bet, and we definitely don't want to give a free card to. I load up another bet, this time to the tune of $375. My opponent, after thinking about it for a little bit, goes ahead and folds. So not unhappy with that result at all. 4-bet pot, and we get value on the flop, and we take it down with no showdown. We move on to another interesting hand here in the early hours of this session. There is a recreational player who makes it $15 from early position. I look down at Jack 10 offsuit middle position and make the call. He's got about $1,000, so even though this call is a little bit on the loose side, I think it's probably going to do okay in the long run. Maybe. I could definitely get behind a fold here very easily. There is some reasoning there that makes sense for a call. But with being in middle position and facing an early position raise, you know, it's just not that special of a hand. But we didn't come all the way to the strip, all the way from downtown to fold Jack 10, did we? So I make the call, button calls, and the big blind calls. 4 ways to a flop of 9-7-5 with 2 diamonds. Big blind checks, the initial raiser puts out a bet of $30. I debate a little bit between raising and flat calling. I eventually decide on a flat call. He is betting into 3 people, so I'm not too sure how much he's going to be giving up. And it seems like he might be a little bit stronger than average. So I decided to flat call and the other players fold. Turns to king of diamonds and he checks it over to me. We block some flushes with a diamond in our hand. We have no showdown value. Tough to know how much equity we have as well to rely on. So I think I want to go ahead and start bluffing here like I would with pretty much all my flushes. I would start betting with those. So I'm gonna go ahead and put out a bet here. This time I bet $115, I believe. My opponent thinks for a little while and then he makes the call. Looking for a little help here on the river, which does not show up. It does put 4 to a straight on the board though. After he checks it over to me, we end up with basically one of the worst hands that we could possibly have in this spot. Don't want to just show down Jack high, of course. We have a diamond blocking flushes. We have somewhat of a range advantage, I would imagine. A field caller versus an under the gun or early position raise should be connected with this board pretty decent percentage of the time. So I'm gonna go ahead and try and get the job done with a $345 wager. My opponent goes into the tank, checks his cards again. Seems like he's not in love with his hand, but in the end he tosses in the call. So we proudly turn over that Jack 10 offsuit, and he even more proudly turns over 2 black aces. This man did not come all the way to Las Vegas, Nevada to fold 2 black aces. Clearly, even on a board with a 4 to a straight and 3 to a flush and etc. So I don't know, I think my line is fine. Pre-flop is definitely suspect, but beyond that I think it's definitely fine. What can you do? Sometimes bluffs don't work. Doesn't mean that wasn't a bad attempt. I'm happy with it, I guess, but yeah, could of course fold pre-flop. All right, one more hand of note here. Again, still in early trading here. Well, I don't know, we've been playing for like 3 hours now, so maybe not such early trading. In this hand, the hijack open limps into the pot. We look down at 8-7 of clubs in the small blind. Standard play would be to just complete there in the small blind, but I think it's good to have some such cards that will provide for some board coverage on different boards. If we're only raising high card hands out of the small blind, and we never hit flops such as 9-6-5, then people might be able to take advantage of us a little bit. So I decided to make it $30 to go. The big blind very quickly calls, and the hijack calls as well. So 3 ways to a flop of ace, ace, king with 2 clubs. This board should favor me heavily, usually. Again, people should sort of suspect that I would have high cards in this small blind raising situation. So I bet out for $30. The big blind calls quickly, and the hijack fold. Heads up to a turn card, which is a total brick. Once again, I consider giving up right away, but again, I don't want to do that, really. I think he's going to have a lot of hands where he will have a king, king, queen, king, jack suited, king, 10 suited. I think those types of hands are going to be in a tough spot facing a bet. I put out said bet for, again, I believe $110 or $115. My opponent thinks for not that long and makes the call. So we are definitely going to be giving up here because it seems like he's probably got an ace here in the hole. That is until the jack of clubs rolls off on the river. So now we make a flush. We do have to worry about the occasional full house. I think it's going to be a bet fold situation here. Wouldn't expect him to go too crazy with just a dry ace, but I think we can maybe squeeze some value out of that sort of a hand. So I'm going to put in a bet here. I bet $225. My opponent verbalizes, "Did you make your flush?" I do not respond, do not reply, and I just sit there silently waiting for him to make the call, which he does. So we go ahead and show him. We say we do make the flush, and he does not show us, but he shows some other people at the table and says he has an ace, and certainly believe him. Maybe a hand like ace queen, ace 10, mow that down, take down the pot. Got into the game for $500 total and cashed out of the game for $1,100 and something or other. Pretty fun night over there at the Wynn.